Hi everyone, Heather here with another Fireside Chat with Michael Funk from the California Department of Education Expanded Learning Division. Just the two of us today. We'll probably make this a somewhat quick chat. Very exciting news, Michael. The FAQs that everybody's been patiently waiting for were released this afternoon. Well, I should say the first round of FAQs. So in just a moment, I'll turn it over to you to provide a little bit of context. Then we'll just walk through each of the FAQs, provide some additional context as needed, and wrap up. And then future fireside chats, I'm sure we'll dig much more into what this means. And I'll just say, as we go into the FAQs, it's easy to get into the weeds, but before we do that, I just want to take a moment to remind everybody of the opportunity we have in front of us. $1.8 billion, almost $1.8 billion in additional funding just for these programs. That doesn't even take into account all the other funding and programs that were created in this budget. And so while we're holding the tension of digging into the weeds, figuring out what this means, also thinking about what opportunity do we have to just build a system that truly supports and cares for our children. So Michael, I'll turn it over to you for some context and then we'll jump in.
Thanks, Heather. Opportunity is in the name, I think. I don't think it's called the Expanded Learning Problem Program or Challenge Program. It's opportunities. And I'm very excited about this opportunity and where the vision in California over the next several years. And there's work to be done. I think we've been working on some aspect of these frequently asked questions every day since AB 130 was passed. And it's gone through several laps of, a simple question that was actually from the field, a simple group of questions that were from the field that were sent over to Department of Finance and Legislature, and then a couple weeks of discussion because there's so many nuances here. And so I'm aware that when we get into these FAQs, that there will be more questions raised as we put out these questions. And I had an hour and 45 minutes with our friends at Riverside County yesterday. We couldn't get into the specifics of the FAQs, but we were talking conceptually about this and how this connects with ACEs in 21st century, and a very, very informative dialogue, but very complex and lots of different questions. So we know that simply putting out these questions on the website and covering them shortly today is not going to address all of the questions, all of the opportunities, all the understanding. It's not going to reveal all the possibilities. So we're committed to be in dialogue with you often. And there's events coming up. September 1 is a save the date where there'll be specific presentations on this. And we know that the school year is starting for many of you. So let's start this together. Start with the first step today, which is the public releasing of these FAQs. And because FAQs are such a riveting and fun topic, I figure we better put the love hat on. And so we remind ourselves as we get into the FAQs that we're leading with love through the FAQs. So Heather, take us through the first question.
All right, so I'm pulling up our FAQs, our ELO program FAQs. Remember, we're not calling it ELO-P, we're calling it ELO program. The link here to access the FAQs on the CDE website, in case you don't have that, it'll be in the chat, so you can link directly to that. And these are, as of today, this is the first round, as we kind of already talked about. So I'm just going to read each one of these. This will be a very exciting reading time, and then Michael will provide whatever context about each of them as needed. So question 1, can unduplicated students currently being served in after-school education and safety, ACEs, or 21st Century Community Learning Centers, CCLC programs, count towards a local education agency's LEA's 50% requirement. So for the 21-22 school year only, existing ACEs and 21st century funded slots can count towards the 50% enrollment capacity requirement with the expanded learning funds for an LEA's unduplicated students. Charters, excluding non-classroom based charters, are considered LEAs for this grant. The intent of the Expanded Learning Opportunities, or ELO, program is to supplement and not supplant services provided under existing ACEs and 21st century elementary middle school programs. However, there is shared understanding that LEAs will need to build capacity this first operational year. In addition, ACEs, 21st century elementary middle school, and the ELO program should be considered a single comprehensive program. In coordinating all these funding streams to move towards a single program, the expectation is that the most stringent requirements will be adopted for program guidance.
So when we've talked about, excuse me, this particular question has brought up a lot of questions, and there'll have to be a lot of unpacking with this. But the second paragraph is really essential, that it is clearly the vision of the Legislature, Department of Finance, and the architects of this. And it's clearly the vision of what's best for kids, that they don't have multiple programs on their campus, that there's one opportunity for all kids. It's not what we've seen so often in education where, well, these kids that fit this criteria can only go into this program, and these kids over here go to this program. And we've seen this, quite frankly, a damaging practice of splitting kids by some categorization. And so it is the vision that this is holistic, but we also understand that there's a significant mental model that that is part of this, because we're all used to ACEs in 21st century, where the money comes from the Expanded Learning Division. It is a grant. You sign legal documents. You have oversight by the state. There are requirements by the state, tools by the state, frequently asked questions by the state. I mean, a whole library of them. And the amount of ed code for ACEs in 21st century compared to this Expanded Learning Opportunities program is vastly different. And the money doesn't come from a program office at the Department of Education. It comes through the apportionment process to the LEA. So by and large, while we're used to ACEs and 21st century grants being assigned to each individual school site, so this particular school gets this much money from CDE to do this, and this particular school needs to meet this attendance requirement for this. This money goes to the LEA, and the LEA decides where the money goes in the district with parameters and suggestions in the ed code, but it is a local decision. And while the bill maps the program components of the ACES program to this fund as well, which we've talked about on a couple of fireside chats already, that mapping was done so these programs could exist together. And in some cases, the Expanded Learning Opportunities program might be more stringent in its requirement than ACES, for example, in serving transitional kindergarten. It's a 10-to-1 ratio instead of a 20-to-1. There's lots of questions that have come up. I'm not going to go into the weeds on them, except it's possible. It is possible to have a funding stream that is coming from the state with more parameters, and the funding stream that goes to the LEA with more flexibility, to blend those together for one powerful opportunity for young people and serving vastly more young people than we've been able to serve in the past. That's what we should hold on to first and foremost. And we'll come out and give several examples and have conversations about your specific questions about this.
Thanks, Michael. So let's move on to the next question, a little bit shorter. Can the ELO program funding be used for the local match for ACES funds? Yes, the ELO program funding can be used for the local match for ACES, as it is the intent that ACES 21st Century Elementary Middle School and the ELO program funding be considered a single comprehensive program. The expectation is that a substantial number of new students will be served beyond the ACES enrollment. In the 2022-23 school year, the ELO program must be offered to all students.
I'm going to clarify something there, that the ELO, so in the AB 130, there are two categories of LEAs. One category is above 80% unduplicated students, and we've talked on the Fireside chat about what that means. In case you missed it, it's a student who is low income, qualifies for free reduced meals, or experiencing homelessness according to McKinney-Vento federal policy, or in foster care, or any combination of the three. They're counted once. That's an unduplicated student. If your district has more than 80% of their students fit one or more of those categories, then you have to meet the 50% enrollment requirement. Then you have to offer the program to all students. If your district is in the category that's 80% or below, unduplicated, your district will receive funding. It will not receive as much funding. How much I don't know yet. School Fiscal Services Division is still working on that. And you need those LEAs must meet the requirements of the program design and how the money should be spent, but they don't have to meet the performance requirements in the bill of serving every child. So some of the FAQs, it's a basic question that was asked early on about using the ELO money for the match. And it really gets into the heart of what's also in the first question, that yes, these programs ideally are blended and braided together.
Thanks, Michael. All right, we'll just keep moving along. Is there a grace period for LEAs to ramp their programs and partners up, or are they expected to be compliant on the first day of their 21-22 school year? Yes, there will be a grace period, as programs will not be required to be compliant in meeting the requirement of 50% unduplicated student enrollment on the first day of the 21-22 school year. The intent is for LEAs to grow their capacity and meet the 50% enrollment in the first year. For example, while the program operates for the intended hours every school day, the program might initially start serving a smaller number of children while they work on hiring and training additional staff. Over time, more staff and students should be added to reach the intended enrollment target during the 21-22 school year.
So this is similar to an ACES program in its first year. The program is required to be open on every school day, except for the three that we give.
Here's what I found.
Except for the three that we give. Was that your iPhone there, Heather?
Yeah, Siri had something to say.
Maybe Siri should give this FAQ. I don't know. That's funny. I was once at a state board meeting sitting right up front, and there was someone speaking to the state board right to my right. And I was close enough where the microphone could pick up what my iPhone was. And all of a sudden Siri said, "I don't understand what you're saying." Everyone looked at me. So the grace period, the program needs to be open. In this, if you're not familiar with the details, the Expanded Learning Opportunities program, when combined with the number of hours or minutes the school day, has to equal 9 hours. And you think about it, that's not that incompatible with the ACES program for the after school, because if school starts at 9 a.m. and then you run a combination of school and the ELO program, and it closes at 6, you've met your 9-hour requirement. So it's not that incompatible, and these things can work well together. I can already hear the question. Well, you say in the FAQ that you don't have to meet the 50% requirement enrollment on the first day. Do you have to have it on the second day? Well, get the spirit of the question here. The spirit of the question here is there's an expectation that LEAs are working to build their capacity and move into this and do the best they can, which is not a pass. It's not a pass, but there will be a grace period, and that's all we're able to say at this point.
What is the enrollment requirement? The 50% unduplicated student requirement is for enrollment. The actual attendance of a student is based on the individual needs of the student and their family.
Yeah, and another way of framing this is the actual bill in year one calls for LEAs with over 80% unduplicated students to enroll 50% of their unduplicated students. And that's it. It doesn't, then the rest of the bill is silent for year one on requirements. So a lot of people, because it just says enroll 50%, then ask, well, but how many of those students need to go? I mean, we're so used to the ACEs attendance formula and those types of things. Right now, there's not even a reporting requirement for the LEAs to submit data to CDE on their enrollment. We're working on what perhaps the state wants to collect to show evidence of the efficacy of the program, but it's not there yet. So that's why we say student attendance, the attendance of a student is based on the needs of the student and family. Right? So that's what we want. That we want the students' needs and the family's needs to be addressed. That is the spirit of this. Earlier, someone asked me, well, can a student be counted as having attended ACEs one day and also be enrolled in the ELO program? Well, if we treat these as one comprehensive program, the answer is yes. And that's not gaming the system. It's one student who is attending the ACEs program. They are there, and they happen to qualify as a unduplicated student because they're experiencing one of those three things. And it's okay to count them as there because they were there, and it's okay to count them as an unduplicated students because that's who they are. That's not somehow double dipping or gaming the system. So these are the kind of ways we have to retrain ourselves for thinking. So it's an important question to get the enrollment part of this clear.
Right, and I think we're coming up on the last question here. Are LEAs required to use the ELO program funds to serve only transitional kindergarten, TK, and K through 6, or can an LEA use those funds to serve another student grade level, such as middle or high school? So starting in the 22-23 school year, LEAs receiving ELO program funding must meet all K through 6 requirements, which include but are not limited to offering a minimum of a 9-hour day for all the students in K6. Once that requirement is met, an LEA may exceed the requirements and serve additional grade spans and/or provide expanded hours of programming. And the relevant California Education Code section is referenced there for you. Additionally, LEAs may combine multiple funding sources to meet these requirements. For example, a school district could serve their TK students in an expanded day through using the California State preschool program as a wrap, and then use some of the ELO program funds to instead serve middle school students or to offer expanded program hours beyond the required 9 hours for the K6 community. And again, we have the California Education Code section that's relevant there.
And so some of the questions that are coming up, well, our elementary schools only go their 1st through 5th grade, and then our middle schools are 6th through 9. And so what does that mean about, well, these are local decisions that you have to figure out. And once again, if you're 80% or below, you have less constraint because this particular question states requirement to serve all students in the 2nd year in 22-23. That's if you're above 80% unduplicated. So the main point of this is the primary intent for this funding stream is K through 6, but it's not exclusive to K to 6. Once you meet what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to accomplish with the K through 6, you can serve other grades. And it's that flexible. It's not prescriptive as to where and how, but you can serve other middle and high school students.
Right. Well, I think that is the end of our official FAQs. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And hopefully that provided, we know that generated more questions, but hopefully provided some context and answers for folks to start thinking about planning, getting ready to open their program doors on day one. So Michael, I'll just turn it over to you for some closing comments before we sign off.
There'll be more questions coming. There'll be more opportunities for dialogue. We haven't totally vetted all the ways we're going to do that. We're going to be looking for examples of LEAs who have really approached this from an opportunity, from an asset based, and bring them on so we can do what we did during the pandemic, which was bring on examples of how people are using the flexibility or the resources that they have. And it's no different here. How are people using the resources that they have to do what the intent is, which is to provide all students in California with more opportunity to experience the expanded learning way, the quality standards, all the things we know that make up high quality expanded learning. All children deserve that. And what I ask you to do is, if you start to feel the gravity of the complexity pull you into the weeds to the point that you lose your vision and you lose the purpose and you lose the why, then step back. Find a way to refresh yourself, recharge yourself, and don't be paralyzed in the fear of not being able to answer every question. We don't have the answers to every question yet. So if you don't, you are right where you should be. What we do know is what the purpose of these funds are. That's when we talk about leading with love. It's not the soft stuff. It's using the intentionality and the discipline to use the resources to provide children what they need and deserve, and to resist the temptation to get paralyzed with some of the complexities and the unknown. I know it's easier said than done, but I know because it happens to me. In this job, I face circumstances and anxiety kicks in. I feel some fear. I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure what this means. But if I let that become what defines what I see, then I lose the vision. As a friend once told me, the sky is the sky and the weather's the weather. The sky, the blue sky here, that's what's possible with this. And there's going to be weather fronts move through. We're going to have some confusion. There's going to be some disruption, and we're going to have weather. But let's keep our eye on the blue sky. Thank you, Heather. Let's leave.
Thanks, Michael.
Yep.
Until next time.